very special guest on hold, Rebecca.
Yes. Our next guest is Dale Wilcox, who is the Executive Director and General Counsel of the Immigration Reform Law Institute. And Dale, you have a big story that is breaking this evening concerning a major investigation that your organization did. Can you tell us about it?
Sure. Thanks for having me. As you stated, our organization has been digging into sanctuary cities for quite some time, and in this case, sanctuary state, California. And through a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, we just obtained records that show a shocking number of ICE immigration detainers dishonored by state and local jurisdictions in California. Specifically, for almost a 2-year period, they have denied 5,600 detainer requests. Now, 3,400 of those detainer requests by ICE were for threat level 1 and 2 offenses. We're talking about homicide, kidnapping, sexual assault, robbery, on and on and on. And for those who don't know what a detainer request is, when any individual is picked up by the police, they're booked into the jail, they're fingerprinted. Those fingerprints are sent to the FBI. The FBI shares those fingerprints with the Department of Homeland Security. And when the Department of Homeland Security finds an illegal alien, they send a request to the jurisdiction holding the alien, asking them to hold them for 48 hours so that they can come and pick them up. Well, California, routinely, many of the jurisdictions in California, and specifically the state in general, dishonor. They won't honor those detainer requests. So they are releasing criminals back out onto the streets.
Let's just go through. You said 5,600 detainer requests that California rejected. And as you mentioned, these are violent criminals. This is for homicide, kidnapping, sexual assault, robbery, aggravated assault. These are not just, run-of-the-mill, just your average person who migrated across our border illegally. These are hardened criminals that ICE was, requesting detainers on, holds on. And can you give us an example of, I noticed in your press release that you have identified some people that would have been on that or were asked on that detainer list that actually committed some serious crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't just theory. I mean, we're talking about people's lives being threatened and taken. We had cited Napa County. Napa County is a sanctuary jurisdiction, has been even before California state law SB 54 went into effect January 1st, 2018. And here last week, we saw the video of the sheriff there in Napa County pulling over an individual, and she went to the passenger door and asked him if she could search the car, and walked around to the driver's side, and he pulled a pistol out on her and took a shot at her. Thankfully, she was not killed. Went around to the other side of the car and she emptied her clip, and this alien is not with us today. But this individual was someone who was released from local jurisdictions 4 times. This guy was picked up 4 times. 4 different ICE detainer requests were issued for different acts, and all of them were ignored by the local jurisdiction. So, and in fact, 3 by Napa County Jail itself. So its own deputy almost got killed as a result of its refusal to honor ICE detainer requests. And this individual had been deported 3 times in the past. So to say there's no emergency or need for a wall, this criminal alien is just waltzing back into the country. Thankfully, the sheriff's deputy is alive today, but that's not always the case. There was an example on Christmas Day last year where, sadly, a police officer was killed by an illegal alien who had a criminal history. Once again, ICE was not notified. And this alien was released, despite 2 previous charges of DUI and possible gang membership in the Serenos gang out there in California. And sadly, this family has been permanently separated from their family member. It's an avoidable death. It's senseless and avoidable.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the case of this Mexican national who was also, previously deported, was charged with the fatal shooting of a Stanislaus County police officer, a Central Valley police officer in California. This is another one where, I mean, he had a total criminal record, and I can only imagine that this is another example where ICE had requested a detainer on this guy, and California just ignored it.
Absolutely, it's frustrating. The bottom line is sanctuary cities are neither humane or compassionate. They're dangerous policies that cost Americans their lives. I mean, we've seen this again and again. How long ago was it? November in New Jersey, Middlesex County there had ignored a detainer request on one of President Obama's so-called valedictorians there, DACA recipient. And the guy goes out to Missouri and allegedly kills 3 people. This is November. I mean, this happens again and again and again. And, what will it take for these anti-borders politicians to wake up and put the, safety and security of their citizens and legal residents before the interests of criminal aliens?
And you mentioned, let's just to clarify for our listeners, you mentioned California's law SB 54. That was the law that that's basically in the vernacular, that's called the California Sanctuary State Law. And it prohibits law enforcement from coordinating in any way with our federal enforcement, our immigration and customs enforcement. So that's one of the reasons why they're actually not able to. But as you pointed out in this report, even before SB 54, even before this law, California was still not coordinating. But in response to this, some officials here in California, some law enforcement in particular, the Orange County Sheriff, Sandra Hutchins, she and her staff have created this website, basically a who's in jail database, as a way to at least sort of wink, wink, nod, nod, allow federal officials to understand who's being released and when. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah. So, this sheriff is frustrated that the state is tying her hands. So what she's done is created a database listing all the individuals that are detained in her jail. So SB 54 only prohibits sharing information with ICE that's not publicly available. So what she's done is made the jail intake list publicly available. So ICE knows who's there and on what charges and likely when they're going to be released. I mean, it's sad that...
Because just to clarify also, the reason why they need to know when they're going to be released is because in a perfect world, or ideally, what would happen is our local law enforcement would inform ICE, hey, we're about ready to release this person, so that ICE could then pick that person up at the jail and, escort that person out of our country or wherever. But because of these sanctuary state laws, they're not allowed to coordinate in any way. So basically, they release the person, and ICE has to go and chase them down somehow after that, right? That makes ICE's job completely difficult, so difficult, that now they're just basically, it's like a needle in a haystack, right?
Well, absolutely. And it's also more dangerous. Think about it. If ICE can go to a jail and pick someone up in a confined, controlled situation, the ICE agents aren't under a threat of violence, and it's for the safety of the alien too. Sometimes the alien will fight, and like this alien who was sadly killed by the police officer last week who drew a gun. So it puts citizens in more danger by requiring ICE to go hunt these individuals down, because when they go to a house to arrest somebody, there's usually other family members there. So you're putting other people's lives at risk and whatnot. There's no need for this. They're already in jail. They've been searched. They have no weapons on them, and they can be turned over to ICE safely.
The issue seems to be that, when I hear the talking points from the Democrats and the left, they want us to think that ICE is just randomly rounding up just, any person who is here illegally and dragging them out of the country, when in fact, these are hardened criminals who are already in custody that they're trying to get off of our streets because they are a danger to us. Why is there such a disconnect with understanding this, do you think?
Well, I mean, with the Democrats, it's about potential future voters. I mean, they have an interest in bringing in new voters so that they can win elections, and that's what that's all about. I mean, 10 years ago, Democrats weren't out preaching sanctuary cities and open borders. I mean, that just wasn't part of their party platform. But they've swallowed this belief that, well, if you want to stay in power, if you want to win future elections, then more voters and diverse voters is the way to go. So that's just a talking point now that they're trying to sell the public. But sanctuary cities are dangerous. Bottom line, they're not humane. They're not compassionate. People are dying. I mean, it's senseless and avoidable deaths. There's no excuse for politicians to sell out their constituency for potential future voters.
The other thing that's interesting about this is the reason why I don't understand how any politician can deny the need for ICE to remove people who are in our country illegally and are violent criminals, is the fact that these violent criminals, the first group of people that they target are the people that are who feel the brunt of their abuse is their actual own community, their own, the Latino community, which is usually where they're based. So their own community is being hurt by them, usually first and foremost. Why in the world would this be politically controversial to remove people who are criminal illegal aliens? It makes no sense.
Well, it's not controversial when you actually talk to legal immigrants who had to pay and fees to become a citizen or legal resident, had to wait in line. They're incensed. They are definitely not on board with this push to amnesty all these illegal aliens and whatnot. Absolutely not. And they are concerned about these criminals. When you look at the polls, they're not pro sanctuary city. They're not pro sanctuary policy. So just like the opposition, the anti-borders crowd has manipulated the stats on who's being removed from the country, like you mentioned earlier. If you look at the stats, Trump is going after the criminal aliens by a huge margin. Now, there are some who get themselves caught up because of different activities, like this week, this Brazilian in Boston who allegedly smacked some poor MAGA-wearing guy in the head and knocked his hat off. She brought herself to the attention of immigration authorities, and now she's in custody, and she's received a notice to appear. Well, that's what happens. She might not have a criminal history, and the opposition might cry and scream that she's in custody, but, she went out there and allegedly did something bad. So
she assaulted an American citizen. That's probably not a good idea when you're in a country illegally to assault somebody in that country, a citizen, for the crime or for the offense of wearing a hat, honoring the president's campaign slogan. I mean, come on. But right. I understand what you're saying. I mean, she's not obviously in the same category as somebody who's a rapist, a child, sex abuser, or et cetera. But again, it's at least somebody that committed, an assault, frankly.
Right. So, I mean, she might not fit what the anti-borders crowd might state as a dangerous criminal, but she brought herself to the attention. Were they out there looking for her? Likely not. They're focusing on criminal aliens right now. So, to your point, yes, the legal immigrant community absolutely is with us on this issue. They don't want criminals in their communities. They left countries where that is the standard operating procedure, where you don't feel safe.
Would it be appropriate to describe criminals in the illegal alien community as predator versus alien? Would that be that's a movie joke?
Oh, Joel's being funny. He's being facetious, huh?
Very nice.
A little light humor on a topic that's really serious, though. But
sorry, I just couldn't resist.
He can't resist these things.
It's predator versus alien.
But okay, but the final question for you on this particular topic of it always bothers me, and I have to ask you because I know that this is you're a legal guy who this is your particular area of expertise. We always see these stories about like a person who's 3-time deported violent criminal. They committed one violent crime, we deported them, and then they keep coming back. Why is it that we can't keep them gone? Basically, I mean, it's so scary and sad. And tragic when I read of somebody who was murdered in a violent way, and it turns out like the person was like deported 6 times or something.
Right.
Why is it? Why do we have this problem? Can you explain it to us? Our last question for you.
Well, they're certainly not coming across the ports of entry. They're coming across the places where there is no wall. Yes, we've come back to the wall once again. They're just pouring over the border. This happens all the time. I mean, every time we hear one of these stories, the individual has been deported numerous times and they've come back. It's that easy, folks. It's that easy to come back across. So they're not presenting themselves at ports of entry. They're coming across where there's no barrier, there's no wall. And the president is absolutely right. There is a national emergency. There has been for some time. And thank God, we haven't had another major terrorist incident as a result. Yeah, but I'm afraid it's in the cards if we don't do something. We have a porous border.
Dale, I know this is another cheat. Final questions. I just said final question, but now I'm doing another final question. Why is it that we can't just keep these people either imprisoned here or have their country of origin imprison them if they committed a violent crime? That's the other thing I don't understand. Why does that happen? Yeah,
we do. They do their time. So, if somebody has committed homicide and they didn't get a life sentence, what usually will happen is they'll do their time in state prison if it was a state or local crime, or federal crime, federal prison, and then they get deported after that. So they get sent home after they've done their time. Sadly, they just turn around and come back.
It's terrible, especially. I mean, we go through some of the stats. We put up articles every day about the people that are detained by our border patrol agents crossing the border illegally, and they will check the background, and many of them they will pop up on a background check because they have a prior conviction in the United States for serious stuff. And I'll be reading and I'll be like, okay, this person was convicted for like child rape and all this stuff. And I'm like, what? Yeah. How did they even out of jail, man? And my attitude is like, you're in jail for, until you're like gray haired and, 1 foot in the grave when you rape a child. But apparently you get out still. So it's just, all of these things are stuff that, as you say, this is why we have to have a secure border. Americans are dying or getting, are hurt because of this. And it's just out of control. But I want to encourage our listeners to go to your great website, the Immigration Reform Law Institute. The web address is IRLI.org. Dale Wilcox, thank you so much for joining us.